MBJ apparently believed that the dating advice Steve and Marjorie were giving Lori was insincere, and insiders familiar with the dynamics of the Harvey family suggest that Marjorie played a role in shaping Lori's cold and calculated approach to dating. But given Marjorie's history, this recent development isn't shocking at all. While Marjorie Harvey is now living the high life, before she met Steve, her life was considerably less lavish, to say the least. Marjorie and Steve's paths initially crossed in 1990 at a comedy club, and Steve later described it as love at first sight. But after a few weeks of dating, Steve and Marjorie decided to part ways, and Steve later alluded that Marjorie dumped him because his money wasn't right yet. However, their paths crossed again in 2005, and this time, Steve had achieved success with The Steve Harvey Show, which prompted Marjorie to reconsider their relationship. Now, I want to point out that Steve was coming out of his second marriage to Mary Shackelford at this point, and Mary alleged that Steve had been unfaithful to her with Marjorie while they were still married. And according to Mary, Steve took their son Wynton with him and turned him against her, while also using his money and influence to manipulate the legal system.
He took my Wynton from me. He turned my son against me, had me evicted from our house, thrown out. All the businesses, all the money, the cars. At a moment when I was down and devastated, he maneuvered everything. He manipulated the courts, everything against me.
However, it's widely thought that Marjorie orchestrated this entire scheme and persuaded Steve to cut all ties with Mary. In fact, Mary recently directly called out Marjorie for her manipulative actions and claimed that Marjorie deliberately undermined her relationship with Wynton.
I know that as a mother, if I was ever in a position to where I had to be in charge of somebody else's child, I definitely make sure they have a great relationship with that child. But I just don't see how Marjorie, in particular, can call herself a mother to her own children and deliberately try to sabotage my relationship with my son. I don't really get that, because personally, you know, even if it was a vengeance vendetta thing, it's like, who did harm to who?
But see, Marjorie's questionable actions started long before she became Mrs. Harvey. Before meeting Steve, Marjorie had been married twice. Her first marriage was to drug kingpin Jim Townsend, and Marjorie's alleged involvement in her husband's illegal activities drew the attention of the FBI and DEA. Allegedly, these agencies informed Jim that unless he cooperated with them, Marjorie would face her own set of charges due to the substantial evidence of her own illegal activities. Jim then agreed to collaborate with the authorities and was eventually indicted for trying to purchase 40 kilos of nose candy. He was sentenced to a life prison term and served over 26 years before receiving a pardon from President Obama in 2017. Marjorie, on the other hand, managed to avoid legal consequences, and she divorced Jim within 5 years of his imprisonment. Shortly after her divorce from Jim, Marjorie entered into a relationship with Darnell Woods, who also happened to be involved in drug dealing. Despite these circumstances, Marjorie went on to marry Darnell in the early 2000s, and they welcomed one child, Lori.